About Mars in Aquarius. Mars is the planet of energy to change things that aren't working. Aquarius is the sign of social relations, culture. So when you bring those two things together, there's a great opportunity for change in our culture, whether it's social culture, business culture, but we need to be very careful with that so as not to destroy the culture around us. So I'll be talking about that a lot in this video. So talking about Mars in Aquarius, whether it's in the natal chart, in the birth chart, or in the sky by transit, when Mars is in Aquarius, that energy that we bring forth to want to change things that aren't working, we want to fight to change to improve them, gets into that sign, that psychological framework of culture and society and wanting to leave the world better than we found it, and that nature of um, where our individuality becomes less important than our collective identity. So you can see where Mars and Aquarius will fight to change social issues, certainly like politics, maybe the environment, again, larger cultural themes, social themes, even like your church or your neighborhood, or where your individuality is aligned with other individuals and you're pulling toward a common goal. Now that's the ideal. In the negative, it's your individuality fighting with others to try to be the leader of the culture or of the movement or what have you. So you see this in politics where you might have a movement, let's say like a Democratic or a Republican Party. They have a sort of common idea, but then they have leaders within that. You see the leaders grapple for control of the ideas, and then collectively the culture itself, like let's say the US or the French culture or the European culture, then they move together collectively in one direction or another based on the sort of will of all the citizens. So all the citizens and their will has a lot to do with Aquarius, and that fighting and striving amongst each other and then eventually together has to do with Mars. So you'll see this Mars in Aquarius will have this, real potential to move forward and advance based on these ideas. Now again, what we need to be careful of with Mars and Aquarius is that we fight amongst ourselves, that rather than find common ground, we fight and deplete the energy of whatever we're trying to do. So you can see again in political parties, it's a good example, when Republicans or Democrats fight amongst each other, their message gets diluted. When Europeans fight amongst each other, or whoever it is, the country, their energy doesn't really move forward, they just kind of stagnate. Same way with the culture, Aquarius isn't just countries, it's also like a business culture. Let's say there's a problem where, policies of a business or of a company aren't supporting the employees, and it creates a lot of infighting. Then the company gets bogged down in this culture of, this sort of toxic culture, and the company doesn't move forward. So at times those things get worked out. So Mars in Aquarius, when it goes through that sign in the sky, by transit, these themes can become really important. Of course, when it's in someone's natal chart, they'll have a tendency to want to fight in those areas. So the person will have a tendency to be very social-minded, want to even be sort of reform-minded, wanting to be very, crusading about how we're going to leave the world, whether we're leaving the world better than we found it, and whatnot. But again, what has to happen is that rather than fighting against others, you need to find a way to turn enemies and adversaries into allies. You need to find common purpose, otherwise we just deplete everybody in the fight and in the struggle. And so, for example, you can see it even within cultures like, let's even just use an example like the astrology culture, like, different, let's just say, for example, different astrologers might argue about techniques, or Western astrology works better than Vedic, or this or that. And again, everyone agrees that we all want, let's say, astrology to be around. And even though people might differ, it's important to not destroy the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, and to agree, perhaps disagree about ideas, and maybe even call ideas out very forcefully, but there's no reason to personalize it, try to personally destroy people and do all of that kind of stuff, which then just bogs everything down and makes everybody look bad. As an example, I used astrology, but it could be any culture. I use it because you're watching an astrology video, but it's the same in politics. It's the same anywhere. We have such a toxic environment, like in our politics, for example, where, like in the U.S., Republicans and Democrats, they can't agree, or they can't disagree agreeably. It's a scorched earth policy where you need to destroy the person and everything they stand for in order to advance your agenda. In that case, no one wins, everyone loses, and it just turns everyone off to the whole thing. Then people don't even want to be involved. They don't want to be involved in politics, in change, because the whole thing is just ugly. And we all wind up getting smeared by the lowest common denominator at that point. You can't even have a reasonable dissent against, let's say, conservative or liberal ideas, because then the extremists descend upon you and just project and smear your ideas, even though they might be, extremely neutral, or just, you're just expressing a view. So this is the problem when a Mars and Sagittarius idea goes too far, and when we're not concerned so much with the larger purpose and the larger theme and the larger cause, which is Aquarius, and we're instead just trying to win arguments and trying to advance our personal agenda and win a personal fight, regardless of the larger cause, right? So we can see this with all kinds of things, like Aquarius also has to do with the environment and environmental causes. We all want the Earth to be here, right? Whether we agree or disagree that global warming is caused by man-made, 100% man-made or 30% or whatever, we know that it's affecting the globe somehow. So we need to invest, let's say, in renewable energy. We need to find new ways to earn money, because pulling coal out of the earth and burning it is obviously contributing somewhat. If people had real common sense, they would also understand things like factory farming and big agro-business. Agriculture is another thing that's utterly decimating the planet, even worse than fossil fuels, and it's also perpetuating a world of cruelty, to animals. It's easily the worst thing that human beings do, is the destruction of animals and factory farming, and nobody even talks about it. But reasonable limits on these kinds of things, we could all agree. We could also all agree we could eat less red meat, eat less meat, burn less fuel. These aren't things that have to be so difficult. We all agree these things are reasonable. But sometimes you can't even get started because moneyed interests and people that stand to lose a little bit of profit won't allow these kinds of changes. So again, when cultures change and transform, sometimes there are radical shifts that happen and things that get battled over and fought about. So when Mars goes through Aquarius in the sky by transit, it's a time where we can see a lot of social battles, social chaos, and people fighting over these kinds of ideas, all kinds of ideas, often political and whatnot. When it's in someone's natal chart, these are going to be themes that they have to deal with in their life. So again, we need to try to learn how to turn adversaries into allies, particularly in relation to larger goals, larger themes. Like, I use the example of the astrology. It's a good one. I've been around a long time. I've known so many Western astrologers, Vedic astrologers who have done all kinds of different stuff, and I'm for all of it, frankly. All techniques and methods work. You can do whatever you like. The things you can't do is spread things that aren't true, make things up that confuse a lot of people. Then you have to come down and say, wait a minute, this stuff isn't true. I certainly got into some of that last year, especially with the stuff that had been said about zodiacs, for example. But I tried to be with a larger purpose in mind, and because and to maintain the idea for sure that we all are studying astrology and people are free to do whatever they want to do, except mislead everybody and then turn people off or whatever. But again, we're all a work in progress. I do my best with it. When you're very passionate about things, you might tend to get sort of fired up about your issues and your ideas. You want to be careful about that in general. But Mars in Aquarius is definitely a sort of composite of that tendency to make things more personal than they need to be. For example, calling out people by name and turning it into a personal feud or battle is always, it's not a good thing. It's to keep it on the realm of ideas, not personalities, like in your battles, is a good thing. So try to keep things on the realm of ideas, not on the realm of individual battles. And you could maybe even turn your enemies into allies with good information. You can do it. With good information, those who maybe didn't like you or who are against you will have no choice but to recognize the facts and go, wow, okay, maybe I don't like him and the fact that he did or said this, but he's showing up with the facts. It's the truth. I can't really deny it, so I have to modify my views. By the way, a lot of that happened with the whole thing with the zodiacs last year as well, even though some people came after me as well personally. I didn't personally attack anyone or really want to, because it's all about ideas. It's not about personalities. It's about the ideas. And so you just present them and do your best. So keep that in mind as Mars goes through Aquarius, or if you have Mars and Aquarius in your natal chart, or even just in general as you're trying to get your views seen and known by others. Keep that in mind. So share this with others, and I hope this was helpful for you to hear.